Hey, I'm Kevin, and this is HFX by Bike, a channel all about getting around Halifax by bike. The Dunbrack Street painted bike lanes run for about 3.5 kilometers between Kearney Lake Road and Main Avenue in the Clayton Park and Rockingham neighborhoods of mainland Halifax. When I did my spotlight video on the lanes a couple months ago, they achieved the lowest score I've ever put up on the channel, and it's not particularly close. With cars traveling 70 to 80 kilometers an hour, reckless drivers, bike lanes that float in the middle of car traffic, and no good way to use the lanes for anything other than going straight through the area without actually connecting to any of the businesses or services in the neighborhood, the bike lanes on Dunbrack don't make a compelling case for swapping out your car for a bike, even for short trips. In today's video, I'm going to try to make Dunbrack Street more accessible by bike, but I'm going to go a little bit further than that. Dunbrack has a massive, almost 40-meter wide right-of-way, with the basic premise of the design being to accelerate cars to really high speeds between intersections, and then just kind of have them sit and wait while the lights cycle through every possible turn movement. In practice, this means that cars can reach 70 kilometers an hour or more through a suburban neighborhood before sitting at lights for 90 seconds to 2 minutes. This brings their average speed down to closer to 40 kilometers an hour, which is how I was able to keep up with cars during my bike ride filming the spotlight video. I think that's kind of a raw deal for drivers, and probably has a lot of implications for the ability of Dunbrack to absorb traffic in the long run. The population in the area is increasing rapidly, so future-proofing this right-of-way by making traffic flow more efficient is pretty important. All that aside, Dunbrack is going to be an arm of the city's future bus rapid transit network, so we're going to need to figure out a way to keep buses from getting stuck in car traffic while we keep cars moving, give bikes better access and safety, and make a pleasant space for pedestrians to walk and roll through. Painted bike lanes like the one on Dunbrack are the most basic form of bike infrastructure, so the easiest thing we can do is just to upgrade them. So we can do things like add paint at potential conflict points like intersections or where the lanes float between traffic lanes. We already do things like this in different parts of the city. This is a pretty cheap option, but mostly doesn't solve the core issue of the design not being appealing to a lot of people. There's already paint on the road to alert drivers to the presence of bikes, and adding a bit of green paint is going to have a marginal impact at best. What about making the lanes protected? Well, that would definitely be an improvement, but it mostly falls apart at the intersections. Slip lanes are obviously not compatible with protected bike lanes, and without them, cars making the right turn on Dunbrack would need to occupy signal time at the intersection in order to complete their turns. That's not inherently a problem, save for the basic premise of the road design is that the lanes occupy a lot of space so that the signal times can be manageably short to maintain capacity. When we introduce 4 new lanes that require their own signal time, we pretty severely reduce the capacity of the road as a whole. And we still haven't managed to get the bike lanes to connect to anything in the surrounding area, so maybe an on-road bike lane just won't work for Dunbrack. What about a multi-use path off to the side? The first Let's Fix video I ever made was actually on what it would look like to expand the Dunbrack Greenway multi-use path. It was mostly concerned with overall pathing and generally hand-waved away everything at street level. The basic idea was to convert the sidewalk along the eastern side of Dunbrack into a multi-use path that could be shared between both cyclists and pedestrians. There's plenty of space available, so for most of the street's length, it could be as wide as 4 meters. This would enable bikes to piggyback on the existing signal time dedicated to pedestrians at intersections, so the layout of the road would remain basically as it is now. None of the intersecting streets, however, have any bike infrastructure and don't have as much space available as Dunbrack itself. So we end up trying to take space away from the road to give to either bike lanes or an expanded multi-use path, which then takes us back to the original problem of the road design needing the maximum number of lanes possible to retain whatever capacity it already has. Okay, so we're running out of options, and the thing that keeps coming up is that the design of Dunbrack is really fragile. It requires a massive amount of space to make more lanes at intersections, which then allows shorter signal cycles, and that makes the whole thing work. But because the layout needs as much space as possible just to be minimally functional, there's no real way to add priority for things like transit or cycling. Even protected pedestrian crossing phases are a recent innovation at some of the intersections along Dunbrack. Every mode added to the road represents a massive loss in capacity for cars, so the city is reluctant to do it. So, to complete any of our goals, the basic design logic of Dunbrack would need to change at the intersections. We need to be able to move more people while using less space to do it. Rather than try to mock up the entire length of Dunbrack, I'll stick to the largest, most complex intersection at Lacewood. If a design can work there, the other intersection should be pretty straightforward. For the first attempt at reworking the intersection, I'm going to go with what's called a Turbo-Roundabout. This style of roundabout has a heavy emphasis on moving motor vehicles quickly and efficiently while still enabling some access for people outside of a car. Instead of lanes defined by paint, there are channels, which have physical barriers. These can obviously be moved over by most cars pretty easily, but the point is to make it fairly obvious to everyone where movement is and isn't allowed. By doing this, the number of conflict points in the roundabout is reduced, and traffic can move more efficiently despite there being much less space used. And because less space is dedicated to moving the same or even more cars, we have space available to add things like crossing points for cyclists and pedestrians, and place bike infrastructure on the streets adjoining Dunbrack. One thing you may notice is that the entryways to the roundabout are oriented away from the center and towards the intended flow of traffic. This is really common in Halifax already, and it's how you set a roundabout up if you want to keep cars at a high rate of speed while they go through it. Unfortunately, it also tends to worsen the safety and comfort for anyone outside of a car. I copied this roundabout from a design in the Netherlands, and it would be out of place in the suburbs there, especially in a neighborhood that's rapidly urbanizing. Contextually, this is more in place near the airport than next to a grocery store. And we still have an integrated transit priority. We've mostly just maintained priority for car traffic, but in a more efficient layout, so let's rethink it again. This version of the intersection is still a roundabout, but with full separation of all the modes of transportation. It's something that would be more at home in a densifying inner suburb along a rapid transit line, and it's also consistent with the city's stated priorities around different modes of transportation. The innermost section of the roundabout is for motor vehicle traffic. It's separated from the others by a buffer that ensures that cars entering and exiting the roundabout are oriented directly at any conflict points and traveling at lower speeds where conflicts are possible. Next out is the space for bikes, which runs adjacent to the space for pedestrians. The dedicated transit lanes run through the center and have priority over motor vehicle traffic inside the roundabout. If compliance is an issue, then this conflict point can be signalized, but it's probably easier for everyone if it doesn't have to be. In line with the original design I copied this from, I've placed transit stops just outside the roundabout in a space that's accessible to both pedestrians and cyclists. Of course, once you have this kind of mostly straight, mostly flat dedicated right-of-way for transit, you can always upgrade it from buses into something more like light rail if you run into capacity issues. Overall, this layout of the intersection probably has something on the order of 5 to 10 times the capacity of the current layout, although it does probably reduce the total number of cars that can pass through it relative to the status quo or the Turbo-Roundabout option. On the upside, both options have cars being able to theoretically move between Kearney Lake Road, Spryfield, and the edge of the urban core without stopping at all, just slowing down at the intersections where there are potential conflicts. For people on bike, the newly freed up space on the streets intersecting Dunbrack are easily wide enough to support separated bike lanes. In tandem with transit, that gives everyone in the neighborhood the option of walking or biking to a nearby transit terminal, or just using the bike infrastructure to make the trip that way. Every mode of travel would have viable access to and through this neighborhood, and this entire section of the city would have an order of magnitude more capacity to move people than it does today. But this isn't the only way the Dunbrack Street can work. There's so much space being used so inefficiently that almost any design would increase the capacity and comfort for people outside of a car. It just depends on how much priority we want to give to things like transit, walking, and cycling in this neighborhood. Those are some ways that I would improve on the Dunbrack Street painted bike lanes, and I guess the neighborhood as a whole. Let me know in the comments what improvements you'd like to see, and let me know if I missed anything. I've included links in the description to the real-world intersections I drew inspiration from, so you can go explore them yourself. If you like this kind of thing and find it interesting, be sure to like the video and to subscribe to the channel. As always, thanks for watching, and see you next time.